We're excited to present another episode of Zoom with COA, the ABCs of the WZC, the World Zionist Congress election, how to vote and why, featuring Liz Berney, ZOA Director of Research and Special Projects, Akiba Covitz, ZOA Strategist, and special guest Jonathan Rubin, ZOA Coalition candidate. Today's webinar will be hosted and moderated by Steve Feldman, Executive Director of the ZOA Greater Philadelphia Region. I am Alan Jay, National Executive Director at ZOA. Thank you for joining us today. Today's webinar could not be more timely. As you will soon learn in greater detail, we are in the throes of a World Zionist Congress election, with voting continuing through May 4th. Thankfully, our panel will help you understand the history and implications of the election, and they will review the voting process. Before we jump into our program, let me share some ZOA news. One short week ago, ZOA hosted an amazing annual ZOA Florida Superstar Gala at the swanky Covitz Center in West Palm Beach, Florida. We honored truly amazing Zionists, United States Congressman from Florida Byron Donalds, Israeli Ambassador to the UN Danny Danone, Professor Alan Dershowitz, the Director of the Gross Family Center for Study of Anti-Semitism and the Holocaust, Lauren Gross, and Rabbi Moshe Shiner, spiritual leader of the Palm Beach Synagogue. Hundreds of guests were inspired by our honorees, and if you've not been to a ZOA gala, you should add it to your bucket list, because the Zionist energy in the room can't be compared. We're in the early stages, planning our annual ZOA mission to Washington, D.C., which will be held on Thursday, June 12th. This is always an important event during which we hear from senators and representatives in the morning, and we meet with the legislators and/or their staff in their offices in the afternoon to lobby for positions important to ZOA. We will begin to organize and promote and advertise the event soon. One detail we know in advance is that space will be limited, so please monitor your email for more information about the event, and please secure your spot by registering early. Our program today is designed to provide a lot of information in just 1 hour. We hope to have time for a few questions at the end of the session, but if we run out of time or if we do not answer your question, you may email your question to zoacoalition@zoa.org, and we will provide an answer in a return email message. All microphones will remain muted for the duration of the program. Post questions in the Q&A feature. I'd like to thank Jackie Schaefer, my colleague behind the Zoom controls. These programs seem easy to run. And with no further ado, I'd like to turn the program over to Executive Director of the ZOA Greater Philadelphia Region, Steve Feldman.
Thank you, Alan. Thank you very much for the introductions of everybody. Welcome to our audience, to our panelists. As Alan noted, we are in the middle of what we call World Zionist Congress season. The election is ongoing now. It runs up until May 4th. May the 4th be with us. We're going to explore what the WZC is, what it does, what it's all about, why it's important, how to vote, all those important, as I call nuts and bolts aspects that we'll be hearing from my colleagues, Liz and Akiba. But before we get to that, I really want to emphasize, and with a very special guest, Jonathan Rubin, why it is important, why the ZOA coalition needs to really triumph during this process and in the election. So Jonathan, I want to go to you. You're joining us live from Israel. You live in Florida, I understand, but right now you happen to be in Israel, I guess, pre-Pesach. Welcome to the Zoom with ZOA about the WZC election. Tell our audience, please, briefly about yourself.
Okay, hi everyone. First of all, thank you for having me here. Everyone on this panel, I met most of you, and I really feel like the ZOA team is ZOA family. We've done great work. I've been involved with ZOA probably close to 10 years now. I was involved in the last Zionist Congress. I went on a tour of the Capitol and met a number of congressmen that I eventually even interned with, thanks to ZOA. So the relationship has been going on for many years now. I'm born and bred Floridian, one of the few, very proud of it. Ended up moving to Israel mid-high school years, studied in IDC Herzliya, then came back for my master's in Columbia, and now a delegate in the Zionist Congress. So happy to speak on whatever I could share about the upcoming Congress and my previous Congress experiences.
Thanks. And how old are you?
27, and my wife is also involved. She's 26. So we got married this past year in Jerusalem. We got
Mazel
engaged in
tov.
Jerusalem. We met in Jerusalem. So we're very excited to continue being involved in the Zionist story while living in America, but also spending time.
Good. Tell our audience, what is it about ZOA, the Zionist Organization of America, our values, our positions, our mission, and as it relates to the World Zionist Congress that attracted you?
So, there are many Jewish organizations in the space, both doing advocacy work on the Hill and the Knesset, and of course in the Zionist Congress. And I've interacted with a whole list of them, and my close friends are involved in a whole number of them as well. I would say what speaks out specifically about ZOA is what elected officials and other community leaders think of them. Whenever I mention ZOA versus another organization, they're like, wow, ZOA, look at the amazing work they've done. All the organizations, anytime a policy is moved in Washington or in the Congress, they're followers that like to take a lot of credit, but ZOA is really the leaders that are doing the research, doing the policy. I mean, Liz is amazing, following up with candidates, writing together policy proposals that are clear and important to the Jewish people, both here and in Israel. And that leadership is unique. Israel they're the only clear right-wing voice that doesn't get distracted by all the other voices and all the other needs. They're not trying to fundraise for youth programs. They're not trying to push specific agendas, but they have a clear idea of what they see the future of the Jewish people, and they have no shame in doing what they do. So it's always good to be surrounded by strong leaders.
And is there a point or two about ZOA and our values, our mission that especially attracted you and that you relate to?
I am proud to see, I was at the gala that was just mentioned. Liz and Mort are unapologetic, and it's just something to be amazed and impressed by. And then when you're on the Hill and you're meeting with congressmen, or when you're in the Knesset meeting members of Knesset, they're the organization that keeps coming up that, look at what they've done, look at the research they provided for us, and they're the ones making the difference without any shame in doing so.
And you were able to be a delegate at the previous World Zionist Congress. Give us and our audience a taste of what that was like.
So that was a very unique experience. I was very young, still very young. I was 24, 25 years old. It was my first time being in that kind of capacity. I've worked with the ZOA in the Knesset, but this time representing as a delegate of the ZOA. We were split into different conversations, committees that were focusing on key issues that were very key to the Jewish people. Who can be accepted in Aliyah? What does American or diaspora Jewry think of a two-state solution? Obviously, post-October 7th, a lot of these conversations are even more imperative. And it was amazing to see all the voices come together, see that, they're all different levels of Jewry that are coming, that are interested in flying across the world and taking the time to have their voices heard. Again, Liz was very organized and very helpful in telling us, hey, you might want to learn more about this subject. Hey, you might want to meet with these individuals, and really educating us on the issues, and meeting with other passionate Zionists, right-wing Zionists from around the United States and around the world.
Mm-hmm. And how was that interaction? Because obviously there is, the so-called elephant in the room. There's a lot of disagreement, friction, I would say, between the right, the left, the center. How was that experience and witnessing that interplay?
There was definitely a lot of drama, for the lack of a better word, in the last Congress. I'll let some of our other speakers here go onto that, but it was really eye-opening as to, what are the incentives? Why are people really pushing? There were large groups that ran amazing campaigns, but they failed to show up, and it kind of made you think, like, what was their agenda? They were very interested in getting there, but when push came to shove, they weren't there. And it kind of forced the coalitions to reorganize the way they were doing things. Again, ZOA is proud and believe what they do. They don't seem, they do and say what they believe. And when you speak with Liz and when you speak with Mort, as I'm sure everyone on this call has done before, they're not trying to hide anything. There are no tricks up their sleeve. You know exactly what they want. They push for exactly what they believe in, and everyone else around them knows that. And so I think that's a lot of clarity that you don't see from the other groups.
There are people watching, no doubt, Jonathan, who've got children your age, maybe even grandchildren your age. This election, the WZC election and the ZOA coalition, and what it brings to the table. Why is this important to your generation? Why is it so important that people watching vote and vote for the ZOA coalition? They may not relate to you necessarily, of a different generation, but why is this important that they participate for the benefit of their children and grandchildren?
I would first take a step back and look at all the organizations. I would say I'm involved as a young professional in many different organizations across the Jewish world, across the conservation world. I'm in the conservation nonprofit space. And you see that there's a lot of gap in the younger generation. I could tell you the ZOA might be, a smaller group than some of these other parties, but I don't have access like I do in the ZOA. So in terms of mentorship or access or just learning skills as a young leader, ZOA, is always available, always helpful. I know everyone on a first name basis. I'm on a texting basis, and then I feel like the relationship is mutual. We want you involved in our events. We want you involved with what we're working on. So I think that kind of access is very unique in the ZOA space. And I also think that what the ZOA work is doing is what you want your world to be living in 100 years from now. I mean, strong organizations have to have a 100-year vision. And after reading the different documents of the other organizations don't have that. They're interested in funding right now for certain programs. They want some discounts on what they're focusing on in terms of schooling and education. And that's very exciting when, you're trying to create new programming. But what is Israel going to look like 100 years from now? And how are we going to balance on what is our say in that? And yes, it might be painful in the short run, but in the long run, when I'm, your guys' age, or when I have children or grandchildren, we want to make sure that Israel continues to be a safe haven for Jews, that Americans continue to have a strong relationship with Israel. And the only organization that I feel confident and comfortable that is doing a good job with that is the ZOA. They might not be, in every corner like some of the other organizations. They might not be as large as the other organizations, but when it comes to mission specific and when it comes to valuable relationships that actually move policy forward, there's no one that compares to ZOA.
Is there one overarching issue, Jonathan, that ZOA encompasses that really will resonate with our audience members who've got children, grandchildren?
So I don't want to talk about what's going to be going on in this next Congress. I'll leave that to Liz and Akiba. But I could tell you in previous trips, a big story that was spoken about was the moving of the embassy. And a lot of, Zionist organizations, they didn't really want to push it because there was a lot of risk in moving the embassy to Jerusalem. I had friends at that time that were serving in the army, and as Zionist as they were, there was a little hesitation. Is it really worth starting a fire? Is it really worth starting a ruckus? And ZOA said, you know what, it might be painful in the short term, but in the long term, this is what's important to us. And I think that, looking back years later, that was a brave decision that had to be done. Yes, there was fear, but you know what? The ZOA pushed it through. They worked closely with a number of elected officials, and they were proud of their decision. And only after it was passed, many organizations said, you know what, that was a great idea. We're taking credit for that. But that was only after it was done. As someone who's a volunteer in different organizations, I could tell you that ZOA was pushing for it before it was done. And that's something that's very unique for these organizations. And only an organization that's willing to say, okay, we're willing to sacrifice the next few months, next few years, but really we're looking at the 100-year picture, has the guts to do a project like that. So I would like to thank Liz and Mort for their leadership, for their encouragement, for their wanting to look at things through the 100-year lens instead of just what's important right now.
Great, thank you. Stick around. There may be some questions specifically for you from our audience, and we'll have a end of show wrap. So stick around. But now I want to turn over to my colleagues, Liz, Berney, Akiba, Covitz, who really are the experts on what the World Zionist Congress is, what it does, how it works, and how to vote, and the mechanics of it all. I want to begin with Liz. Really, Liz Berney is really one of the world's experts on the World Zionist Congress. Before we get to Liz, Jackie, I sent you some images. Can you put them up one at a time?
Yes, doing
Thank
it.
you. Bear with us, folks.
Steve, is there a pop quiz that I don't know about?
A pop quiz? No. Jackie, how we doing with that? Well, we'll come back to that when Jackie's ready.
Okay,
Liz,
do you want me to speak? Okay, I'll speak in the meantime.
yeah, thank you.
Just, so
Tell us, tell our audience what is the
Right,
main mission and responsibility of the World Zionist Congress? Why does it exist today?
okay, well, the World Zionist Congress was formed in 1897 by Theodor Herzl, author of The Jewish State.
And we've got some slides of that coming up, hopefully.
And ZOA was the only American organization there in 1897 at the first World Zionist Congress. And this launched the effort to, I mean, there were other efforts before, of course, the Aliyah, the first Aliyah from, mostly from Russia and related areas in the 1880s. And of course, there have been Jews living in Israel, throughout the millennia. But this launched the effort to reestablish a Jewish state guaranteed by law and recognized by law in the Jewish homeland. And work on that continued, especially over the next 20 years or so after World War I. ZOA was very involved in the effort to obtain the various legal documents that assure Israel's legal right under international law to the land of Israel. And those documents are still valid today. And were made valid, specifically made valid by the UN Charter, which continues the rights granted to the Jewish people under the mandate. And among other things, no foreign power is permitted to take this land that was guaranteed to the Jewish people away. And so we have been involved in this from the outset. And when the reestablished state of Israel was born, the World Zionist Congress, morphed into a body called one of Israel's non-governmental national institutions. There are actually four such, or it's actually the parliament that oversees the four national institutions, which are the World Zionist Organization, Jaffe, Jewish Agency for Israel, which WZO and the federations from the United States sort of go half and half on. Karen Kayemet Israel, JNF, which is a little different, is different from the US JNF. And Karen Hayasod, which is really is more concerned with the fundraising and so on from Jews in the diaspora outside of the United States. The World Zionist Congress is considered to be the parliament of the Jewish people from Jews throughout the world. A third of the people in the Congress, a third of the delegates come from Israel. When people vote for the Knesset, their party in the Knesset elections, they're also voting for their party who will represent them in the Zionist Congress, which is why there is a rule that if you're voting in the United States, you cannot have voted in the last Knesset election, because that would be double voting. That would give you a double vote. About a third of the delegates come from the United States. Another third comes from the rest of the world, South America, South Africa, Russia, Europe. And Naomi, and there was actually another contingent too of so-called international organizations, which obtain free seats without having to go through an election. And that includes groups like Hadassah and WZC and so on. And they all meet in Israel. The election is once every 5 years, and you have a major Congress once every 5 years. In the off years, the other 4 years, there's something called the Zionist General Council, which has the same powers as the Congress, but consists of about a quarter of the delegates that you had in the Congress. So if you're electing, let's say, 16 delegates, you'll have 4 delegates. So it's more or less, to the Zionist General Council. And
Let me interrupt you a second, Liz. What exactly, I mean, you go to the Congress every time
every
and
year, yeah.
participate, actually.
Mhm.
Tell our audience what goes on actually at the Congress. I mean,
Okay.
we think of like the US Congress or the British Parliament, or does it work like that? Or does it work differently? The
Um,
actual in process.
Yeah, well, because you have so many parties, it's more like it's a parliamentary system.
Mhm.
For instance, if there are 152 delegates from the United States, so if you get 10% of the vote from the entire United States, you'll have 15 delegates there. Um, People also combine with world unions. So the ZOA ends up working together with World Likud, and we're the only slate endorsed by World Likud. And we come together with them, and we come together with other people with similar outlooks from throughout the world. So, and we are the largest faction in the Congress, which gives us a lot of power. And because ZOA does the work and puts together the resolutions and tells everybody how to vote, we end up being the leader of that largest faction at the World Zionist Congress, which gives us a lot of power to.
But what goes on
And
actually
what goes
in
on actually,
process?
yeah, I
Yeah,
just wanted to give that little
okay.
background. What actually goes on in the process is you meet with your faction. Um, you decide how to vote on things. You have committee meetings. There are these 3-hour committee meetings, maybe twice a day for the first 2 days, where you go through the various resolutions, you go through the various constitutional amendments. And then if everything works well and you don't have a riot like happened last time, where the left was rioting, then the last day of the Congress, you have votes on the whole plenary gets together, and you have one person, it's often been me, who speaks for each on either side of each resolution, and then the plenary votes. Um, in recent years, there have been some, difficulties with that. So they sometimes, because of the riots, the last Congress, they had to have the
You
vote
mean a
later.
physical riot? A
There's
physical?
riots. I mean, it's okay. Well, first of all, the ZOA coalition in the last Zionist Congress actually took full Zionist Congress actually took place in April 2023, because in 2020, which is when it was supposed to take place, we all had COVID, and there was just an online Congress, so they decided we have to have an in-person Congress, during these 5 years. Um, and the ZOA coalition was invited to a private meeting with the head of the chairman of the Constitution Committee, the Knesset Constitution Committee, Simcha Rothman. Um, Simcha Rothman, and while we were there, the left found out about this. The left found out about this meeting, and they started rioting outside. They tried to break the door down. There were about five of us were holding the door shut. Security had to come to take Simcha Rothman out of there, um, and to rescue him. And then we walked out of the front door, and they were screaming at us, kind of spitting in our faces. One lady took my phone and threw it on the floor. And this was instigated by the worldwide head of the Reform Slate, a woman named Leah Mulstein, and
Horrible.
it was really, really, really horrendous. Another
Do
thing that
you
happened is,
expect anything? I'm sorry to interrupt you. Do you expect anything like that this
I'm
time?
concerned. I'm concerned because one of the groups that's running, called AID Coalition, and it's right next to us. So make sure not to vote and make a mistake and vote for them
Yeah,
on the
no
ballot.
hanging
Next to
chads,
us on
right?
the ballot. They are a lot of their sponsors are groups that were behind the anti-government protests, or the still ongoing anti-government protests in Israel. So I'm concerned that this is going to happen again. And it was not just this private meeting. When ZOA and World Likud had our faction meetings, there was rioting outside about the faction meetings. It was so loud we couldn't hear ourselves.
Terrible.
It
During
was
the
very
Congress,
scary, very
but
scary.
very scary. During the Congress itself, they were all, they were constantly screaming, "Busha, busha," and, shame, shame, shame. I had people running up to me when I would take a position on something, and come over and try to spit at me. I mean, it was just unimaginable. And I was in a debate last night, and I spoke about this and how we have to have, a little more civility at the Congress.
Speaking of civility, one second, Liz, I'm sorry. Jackie, if you could put up some of the slides, I'm sure that There were no riots at the first World Zionist Congress. Jackie, if you can, but Liz, go on. I'm sorry. Keep talking while.
No, I mean, at the first, everybody had, tails and top, their top
Right.
coats and,
We'll
and
see it in a second. Yeah.
in their hats, and it was a very distinguished affair. And, and that it was deliberately made that way, that people should be a very respectful affair, and we really have to get back to that. And also previous congresses that I had gone to were not as bad as that most recent one.
Mhm.
But there was some yelling, and I mean, people would yell at the communists, and the communists would yell at the right, and when people like sort of the far left slates were saying really horrible things, and people got riled up, but it was relatively controlled. It was.
I want to go to our colleague Akiba Covitz. Akiba, tell our audience, you've been involved, you've been traveling around the country actually talking about the World Zionist Congress election and the importance of it. Tell our audience for this event today why the election is important.
I think it's exactly what Liz was talking about. What we saw prior to October 7th was an increase in significant tension, as Liz was referring to, a lot of the riots and the protests in Israel. I think this is a moment where we're, God willing, near the end of the war. What direction are we going to take? What direction is world Jewry going to take? This is the moment. Again, we have a new administration here in the United States. It's a pivot moment in American Jewry history and in Israel's history. Having people from the right who represent the views that I assume everyone on this call share, having them be in the majority in the World Zionist Congress and pushing the kinds of things that Liz has been talking about that go on and Jonathan's been talking about go on, that needs to happen now more than ever. There's a real opportunity to reset where things are domestically in Israel, and again for American Jewry, as the views that ZOA has been espousing for forever, that Mort and Liz have been putting forward since both of them have been at ZOA. This is the time to have that coalition strong and in the clearest possible majority in the World Zionist Congress. That's what I've been focusing on. Yes, you probably haven't, most people in a general audience haven't necessarily heard about the World Zionist Congress. Not only should you hear about it, but this is the election you should, more important than I think any, maybe since 73, in terms of what's going to happen next. We've always stood for those positions, not withdrawing from Gaza, not supporting the Oslo Accords, not allowing there to be the creation of a Palestinian Arab state. Now is the time to really have that clear majority in the World Zionist Congress, so the views of those who oppose us simply don't have enough support. So that's been the primary focus.
Can I add something?
Yeah, please.
One of the other extremely important functions of the Congress, in addition to all the resolutions and so on important issues and statements that we make and changes that we may or may not make to the Constitution, is that the World Zionist Congress helps to determine the leadership of those national institutions that I spoke about. The most important being Karen Kayemet Israel, JNF, which has a lot of money from the lands, from the rents and so on, sales of land in Israel, and that there's an invests in purchasing land and various projects. And one of the big battles is whether KKL funds will, what's going to happen with those KKL funds. We want those to do what's best for the Jewish people, and we want to make sure that those funds go for projects in Judea and Samaria, as well as things like, of course, we want to help every way we can the communities, the decimated communities in the north and the south. But the left is bent on excluding Judea and Samaria, projects in Judea and Samaria, and excluding the 700,000 people who live there from any projects being done over the Green Line in Judea and Samaria. And we've had some success in recent years. We were able to have 10 million go to building a hospital in Binyamin that are of KKL funds that one of our slate partners, One Israel Fund, is building. And that's very important. There are no hospitals now in Judea and Samaria, which means, every time Jews are attacked there, it takes much longer to get somebody to a hospital. This is something that's life-saving. And the fact that the left does not want to help with life-saving projects in Judea and Samaria is a real problem. And that's,
It's horrible.
one of the reasons
It's
why
absolutely
we really
unconscionable.
yeah, it's unconscionable. We really need people to vote for us. These are very vital issues. Regarding government policy, it can have some influence, but these are all, we have to bear in mind these are non-governmental organizations, that the WZO and all the organizations that are directly under its bailiwick are non-governmental organizations. But we want to be able to strengthen the Israeli government in its efforts to do things, and a lot of people are on the opposite camp. For instance, at the last Vada poll, that's the working committee. That's the same thing as the Zionist General Council. We were able to pass, and we initiated and were able to pass a resolution calling for dismantling UNRWA. Very important. There are a lot of groups on the left and there was just a letter and legislation by some people in the squad trying to restore funding to UNRWA. And we feel that resolution helped to strengthen the Israeli government's determination to outlaw UNRWA, which was very important. I think that's going to be a battle. That may be a battle again. There are many. Another issue is a big issue is the BDS, the boycotts, divestment, and sanctions. 10 years ago, ZOA first initiated the first anti-BDS resolution, and we were able to also include in that targeted BDS against Judea and Samaria, and we managed to get that passed.
You can add one thing to that, the general thing, if I can interrupt just for a second.
Sure,
You
please.
asked me the way I've been presenting this to audiences. So again, ZOA does not have a religious affiliation at all. There are people from not only all religious backgrounds, but all backgrounds, Bukharian, Persian, across the board, Russian. But what I've often had people in audiences where I speak who are from the left. And the issue that gets them most exercise is the one that Liz focused on, which is supporting things on the other side of the Green Line in Yud and Shomron. And my response to that has been less focused on policy and more focused on trying to understand, show them the waywardness of their ways. So Karen Kayemet, the notion of that, the fund that remains, comes from the Torah, comes from Vayikra, where it says, yes, you can do various things with the land, but the land belongs to God. So the money that goes to fund the World Zionist Organization is named after, even though many of the early Zionists were secular, is still named for this thing that comes directly from the Torah that refers explicitly to Yud and Shomron. So showing them how, yes, Israel is secular and religious and all the things together. The thing that you're arguing about, where the money comes from, that's named for something from the Torah itself, referring to Yehud and Shomron. And there's this moment where they're like, wait, okay, so, all right. And then that usually confuses them enough that they walk away from the argument. That it's the land of Israel is the permanent endowment of the people of Israel. And the money that goes to the World Zionist Organization comes, as Liz said, from those rents on the land.
Beautiful.
We all grew up, I think, with little pushkas in our grandparents' kitchen where you put money in to give to JNF. That's the land that all bought over decades, over more than a century, before the state, after the state. And that is now funding the programs that Liz is fighting for in the World Zionist Congress.
Excellent.
And it comes directly from the notion in the Torah about the land is a permanent possession of God. We're there as keepers of the land and of the Jewish people. And that's, again, not to make a religious argument, just because it was then, it has to be now. But you're fighting over an organization that has the name that came from Vayikra itself. So that's usually enough to confuse them enough.
I'll put this out for both of you, Akiba and Liz. Obviously, a lot of our audience at ZOA are focused on what's going on in America, the unprecedented level of Jew hatred. Does the World Zionist Congress deal with that at all? Does it have any impact on combating Jew hatred in America and around the world? Liz, Akiba, jump in, whichever one of you wants to take that.
Liz, I think that's you because you know more about what's been debated.
Could you repeat the question again?
Sure. A lot of us are focused on Jew hatred, which is at unprecedented levels in America, around the world. Does the
Right.
Zionist Congress have any impact, input
Yes.
on fighting Jew hatred around
Yeah,
the world in America?
absolutely. And I would like to know, by the way, behind me is the ZOA Coalition logo and logos of, we now have 35 organizations together with us. And many of them are at the forefront of, including ZOA, of course, of fighting Jew hatred. We have End Jew Hatred, we have Americans Against Anti-Semitism, and we have others who are at the forefront of fighting Jew hatred, throughout the country, and also on campuses. And we have students supporting Israel. We have um, Safe Campus. I can't I can't even remember all of them, but these are all the logos
AFC's
back
in
there.
there, yeah.
Yeah, they're,
But how does the World Zionist
and
Congress
the Congress.
directly impact the battle against Jew hatred?
Um, well, in several ways. One is by, combating the BDS and, BDS within the Congress. I mean, one of the most shameful things is when you have wingers who are supporting boycotts against fellow Jews. Um, Another is educational programs. Let's see, I don't remember which year it was, but in one of the recent years, we passed a resolution for programming. And programming, there's like different. The WZO has different has various departments, and one of them is the Department of Combating Anti-Semitism. But we also passed a resolution for a program to teach a worldwide program to teach people about the San Remo resolution and the resolutions underlying Israel's rights to the land. And that's very important because a lot of the anti-Semitism stems from this idea that Israel is stole Arab land or is an occupier of Arab land. And it's very important to teach Jewish students, and which is something that ZOA does, but the Congress can help amplify our efforts to do that, to teach Jewish students what the story is. So you won't have Jewish students going over and helping these Hamas organizations, so that they'll understand that we didn't steal this. This is our right. This is our
Right.
rightful land.
Right.
And teaching that history. So I think the educational component is very important. Interestingly, almost every slate talks about education, but they don't say what type of education. And the type of education is the type that that I was just talking about. And I was in a debate last night, and I also mentioned this. So this is the type of education, and that we have to we have through that resolution pushed through, and we want to do a lot more of. Um, I don't remember I don't remember which year it was. It may have been 5 years ago or 10 years ago, prior to the election, 5 or 10 years ago. I took a look at some of the educational materials that the WZO was putting out, that were apparently put out by the left, and they were horrible. They were lauding some of these uh, kind of anti-Israel NGOs, Maxim Watch and so on, which, for people who don't know, that Maxim Watch is a group that goes to the checkpoints and harasses the Israeli soldiers who are trying to protect um, Israelis from terrorists coming in or going through the checkpoints. And it's and almost every one of these educational material items that I looked at was awful, and basically did the opposite of what it should have done.
And is that controlled by the World Zionist Congress, or the money is allocated by the Congress?
Monies are allocated, so that's one of the things that we have to, you have to make sure that the educational, that we have control of these departments or these projects that are determining what the education is, so that they're not putting out counterproductive educational materials and educational programs that harm, fellow Jews and harm Israel and harm the efforts on the campuses. I also worked with some of other campus groups that are in the ZOA coalition, and actually, and also some groups outside of our coalition, who have a smaller campus presence on resolutions about programming on the campuses themselves, and also demanding uh, better treatment from college presidents and so on. So this is, so it definitely does have an influence, and there's a lot that
Does
we can do.
Liz and Akiba, can we go through a lightning round of the key planks of the ZOA coalition? Just bullet points. What are some of the key planks of our coalition?
Liz, again, I think that's you.
Okay, well, you know what? So I don't miss any. I want to just pull up the platform if you don't
Okay.
mind.
But just the bullet points, not. we
Yeah,
just
I
don't
know,
have
I
time
know,
for
I
all the
know.
details.
We have the,
I should say, yeah, that's at zoacoalition.org. You can read the full platform and everything there, letter
Good.
for letter. And you can read all
okay,
the background materials.
okay,
Can we
here,
put
here,
that in the
here,
chat, Jackie? Can we put that web address in the chat, please?
okay, but here is the bullet point version of our platform.
Great.
Globalize and promote Jewish safety and Aliyah. Oh, I should mention, by the way, that Aliyah, directing funds for Aliyah for endangered Jews is a very important part of what we've been doing also. For instance, there are 5,000 B'nai Menashe Jews in India who are caught in the middle of a civil war, which is very dangerous. And we've been pushing to to prioritize getting them out. Okay, combat anti-Semitism and boycotts, divestment and sanctions, BDS. Defend the Jewish people's legal, historic, and God-given rights to Israel, Jerusalem, and Judea and Samaria. Reject the creation of a Palestinian Arab terror state. Support Israel's courageous soldiers and their efforts to achieve victory. Confront anti-Israel bias at the UN and other institutions. Rebuild Jewish communities in decimated, evacuated areas in Judea and Samaria. Respect Jewish faith, values, and traditions and all the Jewish people. Strengthen Jewish and Zionist education in Israel and the diaspora.
Thank you. Next question. People who vote, who are thoughtful and look at all of the slates running, and there's about 20, more than 20 slates running, may notice some similar pledges of what a coalition says they want to do, what they're working on, etc. Explain, and this is for Akiba or Liz, what really, when you really come down to the nitty gritty, what sets ZOA apart from similar sounding, similar seeming coalitions that are also vying for delegates?
I'll say one thing first, Liz, and then I'll hand it over. So just to call back to Jonathan Rubin and what he said, I think everyone now believes that all the slates on our side of the spectrum believe that Jerusalem should be where the United States Embassy is. We were the ones for years, Liz and Mort were the ones for years that pushed that behind the scenes, despite all of that pressure we got in the other way. So we have, as Liz will say many times in her answer as well, the proven record. You can take our positions after we've taken all the gunfire, and then come over the hill after we've dealt with all of the counter and the anger and the smears and all of that. We were the ones that were there going over the hill first, regardless of what kind of pressure we stood up against. So even if people do support similar positions in some ways, we were the ones that were there against Oslo, against the Gaza withdrawal, for the United States Embassy, entirely against, not because of the time or the people, but just against the Palestinian Arab state. And there were lots of people who were there with us, but we were the ones that fought the wars, and they were happy to come up the hill behind us. So the difference is proven record, and I'll let Liz talk about
Liz,
that.
what can you add to that, please?
Yeah, I mean, the difference is really that, especially there's 9 new slates that have never done anything. And there are other slates who are not so new, but who haven't done things. And we have the proven record of doing this for 128 years. I mean, the first anti-BDS resolution, I mean, a whole series of, we have a lot of this on our website also. And I mean, we've done the resolutions on promoting sovereignty in the Jordan Valley, on requiring the use of the proper name, Judea and Samaria, because the names are very important. And when you call it the West Bank, it de-Judaizes the area. And it's just a false name for the area. We initiated and passed resolutions giving highest funding priority to rescuing endangered Jews, for the resolution I mentioned for dismantling UNRWA, condemning the Red Cross for failing to assist the hostages. And incidentally, Mizrahi was against that resolution, condemning the Palestinian Authority's pay-to-slay payments and terror incitement, opposing allowing the PA, the Palestinian Authority, Fatah to govern Gaza. We've been passing all these resolutions, and now other people are saying, other people who's on the right are saying, oh, well, they're for these things. And incidentally, quite a few slates on the right have told me, the new slates on the right have told me, well, don't worry, we're going to follow your lead at the Congress, because they know that we're the ones who have been doing all this. But my concern is, if you dilute the vote and the leader isn't there, I mean, the leader has to, we've been the one leading all these
Right.
fights and leading all these charges, and we really need people to vote for us so that we're there. I mean, the others, what's going to happen to all these other slates when who have never done anything, don't know what they're doing? Past history has also shown that many of them don't bother showing up, and I think Jonathan was mentioning that. I mean, where some of the new slates end up getting 1 or 2 votes, and they don't even bother. And sometimes there are votes that are really close, and the fact that the votes went to some of these slates, which end up not even bothering to show up, is a problem. There was a resolution by the left a number of, just maybe, I don't remember, but like within the last 5-10 years, saying that Israel was a systemically racist state.
Right.
I think we only got that defeated by 1 vote. And so it's really important to have slates where the people show up and do the work and know what they're doing, and leading the
Absolutely.
way. Before every Congress, ZOA puts together something like a 30-page document going through every single resolution, what's wrong with it or what's right with it, how to argue for it in your committee.
So essentially, our coalition, and mostly the credit goes to you, Liz, is the professional slate, if you will, on the right side of the issues. Yes, that really is what sets us apart, the
Yeah,
experience and how seriously you take this.
Yeah, we take it very seriously, and we distribute that, and this document that we put together, it goes to all of the groups in World Likud, and it goes to a lot of the other right-wing slates, because they walk in there, not even knowing what it's all about and what to do, and so we're the ones explaining to them, this is what you need to do, and we need to be there. We really need every vote. I mean, just everybody listening to this, I want to ask you to please make sure to vote for us. Tell your
We're
family.
going to have that pitch. We're going to have that pitch. But before we do, I want to hear from Akiba the steps, the real ABCs of how to vote. How do you cast a vote, Akiba?
So the vote is overseen by the American Zionist movement, which is, this is not a fake background. It's 10 stories below us in New York City. They oversee it. They have a vendor called Votum, which is a professional organization that collects and records all the votes. So the simplest way to do it is if you want to save time, if you want more information, you go to vote ZOAcoalition.org or vote ZOAcoalition.org, either one. And you'll get more information there. But if you want to go directly, and that way we can really show you what you need to know. But if you're in a hurry and you want to do this in a few minutes, the mechanics, you go directly to, the simplest URL is zionistelection.org. Thank you, Jackie. You anticipated it to the second. You go right there. There's a longer URL you don't need to know. Go right there.
And it's in the chat.
Yeah, it's in the chat right there. And again, zionistelection.org. We're open about where we go about that. And if you already registered, which most of you have not, thank you, Jackie. Then it's very simple. You get a pin from Votum, from this organization, that you then go and you put in the pin and you vote, and it's 30 seconds. If you haven't done that yet, you have to register first. So you go to that website, you put in your information, you have to pay $5. The $5 does not go to ZOA, it goes to manage the election, goes
From AZM.
directly to AZM. It's not a donation on our part. And you put in however you want to put it in. You can also do it through paper ballot. If you're going to do that, we recommend, reach out to us. We'll send you a paper ballot. You can print one out yourself directly from the website. Yes, and Alan is direct, we'll get through the process. So you go and you register, you get your PIN, you pay your $5, get your PIN, and it'll come to your email. Sometimes it's stuck in your spam filter. Are we allowed to say spam? Junk
Yeah.
filter. Spam's definitely not kosher. And it's
We're
in
not eating it.
I don't want to endorse a product that other people might eat.
We're not eating it though.
You get your PIN, you go back to the
You can't
website.
get kosher for Passover spam?
No, but time
Um,
is growing short, so
It's going short. So you get your PIN and it's straightforward. For the whole process takes under 5 minutes. You'll have everything you need. Again, go to zionistelection.org or vote ZOA coalition.org. Get all the information. Either one works. The whole process
yeah.
takes.
Who's eligible to vote? Who can vote?
Yeah, we went through this a little bit before, but everyone over 18, you have to be
17 and 3/4. You have to, if you're 18 by June 30th,
30th.
you can vote. So something like 17 and 3/4 or whatever.
So go to your local high school, but make sure that everyone's going to be 18 after they vote. As he said, you have to be a U.S. citizen. You can also have Israeli citizenship, but your
You have
primary
to be Jewish.
Or resident, no, permanent.
You have to be
you don't- you
Jewish.
don't- Okay, okay, or it's U.S. citizen or permanent resident. So
Right.
if you're living here, and you're citizen of another country, but you're living here permanently, you can vote.
Yes.
But it's
But-
important.
but-
You have to be Jewish and you have to agree
Yeah.
to
Have
the
to be Jewish.
Jerusalem Declaration, yes?
Yes, you
Yes,
have to be
and-
Jewish. And by just one thing, by Jewish, again, there's not a halachic test here. I think we all have our own different definitions. I think I have the mainstream one, but you can't profess another religion.
Subscribe to.
It's a very important dividing line. So if you say that you're both Jewish and Christian, in my view, that excludes you from
Yes,
voting.
that excludes you. That excludes you.
So, and as Liz said, you can't have voted in the previous Knesset election because your vote would be counted twice. So
The November 2022 election.
We do have a couple questions from the audience. I want to go through quick questions, quick answers. Somebody named Kay Resnick is asking, does one have to give money in order to vote? I think this is, he's asking or she's asking above and beyond the $5 registration fee that goes to the AZM. Must one additionally donate money to any organization to vote?
absolutely not.
Let me take that. The answer is no. However, if for people who are become delegates to the Zionist Congress, they have to give a little contribution to, I think it's to JNF and to a federation. So, but it can be as low as
That's
a
a
dollar.
delegate, not a voter. That's
Yeah,
someone
if
who's on
you
the
actually become a
candidate.
delegate, if you actually become a delegate, then you do have to give an additional contribution, but not.
Again, you will
voting.
know if you're a delegate because that process was completed at the end of the last calendar year. So if you're not listed as a candidate on our slate,
You
then,
definitely don't have to, yeah.
but those of
Yeah,
us.
but
who
as
are-
of now, until you find out that you're a delegate, you don't even have to bother. Like if you're listed as a candidate on a slate,
Okay,
you
I
know,
think they get it.
it's not required.
I think they get it. Why are this is from Panina Mintz, why are anti-Zionist groups allowed to participate in the World Zionist Congress election? It doesn't seem to make much sense, given that it's a Zionist Congress. Why are anti-Zionist groups allowed to participate?
That's a great question. And that's one that we've been trying to do something about. People have to check this box that, that they agree with the Jerusalem program. I mean, the Jerusalem program actually should be amended in ways to make it more Zionist, but it's decent. And I think that would be helpful. One of the things I've been trying, I think BDSs should be a real dividing line. After we passed the resolution against BDS, we were able to get some of the groups like Partners for Progressive Israel, which on its website had lists of products from Judea and Samaria that they were telling people to boycott. We got them to take that down. We got people to remove some of the blatant stuff from their websites. But these are groups, there are still groups that in there that promote a lot of a lot of really, a lot of what I would consider to be anti-Israel policies.
So why are they allowed?
And
So,
we've been trying, I've gone to there's something called the Zionist Supreme Court. I've gone to the Zionist Supreme Court to get them eliminated. I've proposed even stronger legislation, that if somebody is a boycotter, for instance, that they cannot, they're not eligible to go to the Congress or to vote. We need more votes to get some of those through. One of the things we want to do is we want to be able to say if you're anti-Zionist, and sometimes we've succeeded. For instance, Peter Berney, who defines himself as an anti-Zionist, was on one of the slates in the last election, and we in another slate filed a complaint about that, and he ended up withdrawing. So there are times when we have been able to force people who are clearly anti-Zionists off, but J Street is who's has terrible policies and trying to defund Israel's military and so on, trying to make supporting some of the Biden administration's efforts to not provide arms to Israel. I mean, they've supported a lot of bad things. They're supporting trying to fund UNRWA even after UNRWA employees participated in October 7th.
excuse me,
But
because I just want to get to.
they're still on many slates, and
Right.
the answer to that is we need the votes now so that we can pass the kinds of amendments and resolutions that are needed to stop this. And we've been trying. We've had some success, but we want to do more. We want to be able to do this even more.
We have one more question from Ramon Hernandez, who identifies himself as a Christian Zionist, asking a very, very important question. Should more people get involved, engaged, and educate about why it's important to vote for the ZOA coalition and the World Zionist Congress? In other words, the people watching, everybody needs to help recruit and get the votes. That's what he's asking.
Yes,
Yes.
ask your Jewish friends who are 17 3/4 or above to vote in the World Zionist Congress. And
For the ZOA coalition.
yes, for the ZOA coalition, we welcome support.
Slide 15. Slide 15.
I'm going to go back to Jonathan Rubin to take us home with really why it's important to get out the vote, why this vote matters to people, to Jews of all ages.
Yeah, I would say that this is actually a very unique election. If you look at the history, we're kind of on this cusp where you have, and Liz could back me up, where you have, in terms of demographics or voting, you almost have an equal split between the right and the left. Liz, would you say that that's true demographically? And the last election have finally made that switch, and now we can solidify that base.
Yeah, I mean, finally, the last election, we ended up with a slight majority for the right, but not enough to do everything that we needed. And also, you had these international organizations, which in a number of significant cases, ended up voting with the left, and that we didn't have enough of a majority to do all the things we wanted to do.
So it shows when you
Jonathan,
have
really, let's leave our audience with why it really is vital.
So every vote matters, because when you're dealing with such slim majorities and you're dealing with such tight coalitions, it doesn't matter what age you are, it doesn't matter from where in the United States or beyond you're coming from, it doesn't matter what part of Judaism you're coming from. In the end of the day, when you're dealing with such tight numbers, we need every vote to say that this is something we care about, or we risk losing all the great work we've done so far, and really having the American Jewish voice shifted in a way that we don't want to be seen when we already have the numbers, and it's just a matter of coming out and showing what's important.
And to learn more, go on.
And then, again, so then these elections obviously are every 5 years and affect the policies that affect, Jews and Jewish children, Jewish grandchildren for the next 100 years. So it's important to, to protect Israel the way it is now, and for it to get even stronger, to vote for your children and grandchildren for the next generations.
Thank you. There is a guide about voting at zoacoalition.org. All the details about what the ZOA Coalition stands for, the organizations that are part of the coalition. That's zoacoalition.org. To learn more about ZOA in general, the website is, of course, zoa.org. And to reach National ZOA, the email address is info@zoa.org. I want to thank Liz and Akiba and Alan and Jackie and Jonathan for being part of this and
Thank you, Steve.
work in the background. I want to thank our audience. Please help us get the vote out. We've got less than a month to do this, to get the most votes of any slate. And it's really up to all of you watching and participating to help drive the vote. So thank you. This is being recorded, has been recorded, will be available for you to share on the ZOA YouTube channel. I'm sure it'll go out by email. Thank you all. I wish all of you a meaningful and joyous Pesach coming up. Take care, everybody.
Thank you. That's
But Krishna, yeah.